1996, a research vessel headed by Brock Lovett and his team searches the wreck of the Titanic. They searched having in mind to recover a diamond called the Heart of the Ocean. As they searched the ship, they saw a box that they assumed contained the diamond. They brought the box out and celebrated even before they opened it. As they break out of the box only contained a drawing. Investors kept calling in, and Brock was afraid he wouldn't get the diamond. They cleaned up the drawing and saw it contained a picture of a naked woman with the diamond. They went on air and announced their present achieved in the waters. As they broadcast to the news, Rose, a 101-year-old woman who was the lady in the drawing, watched the news and called them. They asked her to come on the waters to account for her personal experience with the crash. Rose and her granddaughter traveled to the ship. They were welcomed by the whole team, after which Mr. Bodine gave her the forensic account of the crash. She thanked Mr. Bodine for the account and told him that wasn't how it was watching it physically. So they asked her to give an account of her personal experience. In 1912, the big gigantic ship called the Titanic was built. About that same time, Rose was betrothed to a rich fiancé, Calderon Hockey. Alongside her fiancé and mother, Rose are to travel down to America on the Titanic. As they arrived at the Titanic that day, sarcastically, Cal commented, "Even God can't sink the ship." They rode on the first-class ticket on the ship. Although Rose felt the journey was to kill her dreams, as she had no feelings for her fiancé and the marriage was encouraged by her mother because it would take care of her financial needs. Meanwhile, Jack Dawson, a young artist, and his friends were playing a poker game. They won the game and they got a third-class ticket to travel to America on Titanic. Happily, Jack and Fabrizio ran to the ship before it sailed. On the ship, Rose set up their luxury rooms and had to go on several dinners with rich people she called narrow-minded. On the other hand, Jack enjoyed the breeze of the sea and spent his time drawing other travelers on the ship. After one of the boring dinners Rose had to attend, she ran out of the ship and stood by the deck of the first-class level ship. Jack was by the deck in the lower level, and his glance caught Rose. He liked her, and he was told immediately by his counterparts that the ladies weren't his level. That night, Rose had to attend another party with the same class of people, and she felt irritated, thinking that is the type of life she would lead all through her marriage. She ran out of the ship, ran towards the lower part of the ship, and prepared to jump into the river. She ran beside Jack, who saw her and ran after her. As she prepared to jump, Jack told her she wouldn't jump down, and she insisted that he shouldn't underestimate her because he doesn't know how far she can go. Jack then told her if she jumps, he will jump right after her. They kick-started a conversation about how cold the river was, while Rose was still hanged for jumping. Jack told her that he had once fallen into the ice and the pain was enough to kill. Rose decided not to jump, so Jack drew her up the rail. Suddenly, she slipped. She begged Jack to hold her tight as she didn't want to fall. He carried her back up while she jumped on him. The ship security arrived and saw him with Rose. They arrested Jack, and Kaladin shouted as to how disgusting it is for nobody to touch his future wife. Rose told them it was an accident, and Jack stepped in to help her. To reward Jack for his good work, Kaladin asked him to join for dinner with them the next day. That night, Kaladin went to his fiancée's room and confessed how much he loved her and begged her to give her heart to him. Back in return, he gave her the diamond necklace and told her it was first worn by Louis XIV and is about 54 carats. He wore the diamond on her. The next morning, Rose called Jack, and they both strolled on the deck. Rose asked him what he thought about her when he saw her jumping, and he replied that he only felt, "What is it with this lady that she felt she had no other solution than to jump?" Rose told him she lives a life of misery and over 500 invitations had been sent for her wedding, and she has no other choice than to get wedded. Inquisitively, Jack asked her if she loved her fiancé. She took the statement as an insult and told him to leave the first-class deck. She collected his drawing book to check what he had been holding. She saw the amazing drawings in the book and told him he has great talents, and she also saw drawings of naked women. Rose, the Countess, and Mrs. Brown were in the coffee room. They stood up to take a walk down the deck. In that same room, Mr. Ismay, the designer of the Titanic, told the captain of the boat to increase the ship to its full speed, saying it would be more good news if the ship got to New York faster than expected, although the captain, who thinks otherwise, told him it is safer to make the ship move in its original capacity. Meanwhile, Jack and Rose talk about themselves. He told her about his journey around the world and how he travels without any regret. She wishes to live her life in such a manner, and they practiced how to spit like a man on the deck. Where they stood practicing, her mother and her friends walked by, and she introduced them to Jack. She told them how Jack saved her life and that Kaladin invited Jack to dinner. It was almost time for dinner, so Rose left. Mrs. Brown asked Jack what he wishes to wear for the dinner, and he informed her that he would wear his regular clothes. Mrs. Brown brought him into her room and dressed him with her son's clothes so that Jack looked so radiant. During the dinner, Jack was also unrecognizable that Kaladin commented that he would almost pass as a gentleman. Rose showed Jack all the royalties on her class of ship and introduced him to everyone. During the dinner, he sat with all the royalties in the world with Kaladin trying to make fun of him for being poor. Jack shunned his intentions away and used that opportunity to inspire all the guests at the dinner about making things count. They all toasted to making things count, and the dinner was finished. The men were to hold separate discussion, and the women stayed at the table to talk. Jack was invited to go with the men, but he rejected and told them he would like to go back. Before he left the dinner, he gave Rose a note telling her to meet him at the clock, and she came there. They went to the third-class ship, they drank and played till it was morning. The following day, Kaladin got reports of Rose's activities the night before. During breakfast, he got so angry at Rose that she was terrified. While she was getting dressed for the day, her mother also came by. She warned her about breaking off the engagement and told her the impact it would have on their family. She asked her if she would love them to become poor, as this would be their fate if she doesn't get married to Kaladin. Rose accepted fate and agreed not to meet Jack again. That day, Jack came to check on her, but he was sent away from the first-class deck. He later sneaked into the deck to meet her. She told him to get away from her as she doesn't want him. She told him that she loves Kaladin and that she doesn't need Jack to save her from him. That night, as Jack stayed by the deck of the ship, Rose came to meet him and told him she had changed her mind. She took him to her room, took the diamond necklace Kaladin gave her, wore the necklace, and told Jack to draw her naked. According to Rose, that was the most erotic moment of her life. After the drawing, they returned the necklace and filed the drawing in the safe. Kaladin told one of his workers, Lovejoy, to find Rose, and they were looking all around for her. The captain met with Lightoller, one of the sailors. Lightoller told him that the sea is really calm, so it may be difficult for them to see icebergs ahead, but the captain insists they keep the ship in its full force. Lovejoy found Rose and Jack. They ran into the engine room. When they came out of the engine room, they saw a truck. They ran inside the truck and hid from Lovejoy. Then they started to stare at each other passionately and started to kiss. Rose asked Jack to put his hands on her body, and they passionately had sex with each other. Lovejoy took Kaladin to Rose's room, and he saw the naked drawing of Rose and insulting note she left inside his safe. The securities in the ship searched for Rose and Jack. The sailors checking the sea saw a giant iceberg ahead. They alerted the others and they tried to turn back to the ship. It was too late as the ship hit a part of the iceberg. The ship trembles. Rose and Jack witnessed this collision and they left the deck to warn the others. Little did they know that Kaladin had planned to set Jack up for stealing his diamond necklace. As they walked towards the first-class ship, Lovejoy greeted them and slipped the necklace into Jack's pocket to frame him for theft. When they entered the room, Kaladin had already called the master-at-arms to report a theft. He asked them to search Jack's suit, and they found the diamond. Jack begged Rose not to trust Cal as he didn't steal the diamond necklace, but Rose couldn't trust him. He was arrested and handcuffed at the lower part of the ship. All of the knowledgeable people in the ship came together to weigh their loss, and they realized the ship would sink in at least an hour. They asked that everyone should go out so the lifeboat could save them. The captain asked that they should save women and kids first. Meanwhile, Jack was locked up. Lovejoy punched him severally in his stomach and left, taking away the key. The part he was locked in was already filled with water and he was about to get drowned. As the high class was about to enter the lifeboat, Rose expressed the lifeboat would only be able to take half the people in the ship so that half would die that day. Sarcastically, Kaladin commented, "Only the half that doesn't worth it." He told her he wishes he took the drawing along with him. At that point, Rose realized Kaladin had set Jack up. She left her mother in the lifeboat to go and save Jack. Kaladin tried to hold her down, but she spits at him and leaves. She asked for the directions of the prison, and Mr. Andrew described it to her. She got there at the time Jack was struggling to stay alive. She helped him break the handcuff. They broke out of the doors and they got to the doors of the deck. The doors were locked because only women and children were allowed to go out. Jack and Fabrizio carried a chair and broke the door to get to the deck. Since men weren't allowed to leave, Kaladin went back to his room, took his diamond, and took some cash to negotiate his entrance into the lifeboat. He met one of the captains and negotiated. As he was about to enter the lifeboat, Lovejoy told him he saw Jack and Rose at the other side, so he left his lifeboat to find them. Rose had already gotten a lifeboat, but she refused to enter because Jack couldn't go with them. Kaladin convinced her that he had another lifeboat and he would include Jack in his boat, so she should enter the boat. Immediately she entered. Kaladin told Jack he didn't make any plans for him and he should know that he always wins. Suddenly, Rose jumped out of the lifeboat and went back into the ship. Jack ran to meet her and they kissed. She told Jack she couldn't leave without him and reminded him of their promise to stay together. Kaladin was jealous. He took Lovejoy's gun and shot at them. Jack and Rose ran for safety as Kaladin followed them. Cal realized he was running to his doom, so he ran back and went to the ship deck. He tried to meet the sailor he negotiated with, but the sailor threw his money back at him and claimed he would only save women and children. Jack and Rose ran towards the first-class level where she saw Mr. Andrew. He apologized to her for building a ship that would end up drowning. He gave her the only life jacket left in there. By the time Jack and Rose would get back to the deck, everywhere was chaotic. The ship had broken and one part was in the water. Kaladin pretended as a father of a young crying child, so he was allowed into the lifeboat. Rose's mother watched the ship's drowning from afar on her lifeboat as she remembered her daughter. Rose and Jack hung to stern rail desperately as they shared their last memories and kissed. The ship capsizes and completely drowns. Jack hung on to Rose, urging her to swim. They saw a wooden part of the ship floating on the water. He urged Rose to climb, but as she wanted to climb, he realized the wood would only hold one person. He asked her to promise him she would stay alive as he hung on to the wood. One of the lifeboats turned back to save the remaining lives. As she seized the boat, she tried to wake Jack up so they would go together, but she learned that he was dead. She used a whistle to alert the lifeboat. She was saved by the boat. The 700 people saved on the lifeboat waited for another ship to arrive. On the ship, she saw Kaladin, probably looking for her. That was the last time she saw him until she read he committed suicide after losing his fortune in the Wall Street crash of 1929. The RMS Carpathia rescues the survivors. In that ship, she changed her name to Rose Dawson to escape from Kaladin. She checked the pocket of the coat Kaladin gave to her. She found the diamond necklace in it. After her story, the whole crew was in tears. Lovett abandoned his search after hearing Rose's story. Alone on the stern of the Keldysh, Rose takes out the heart of the ocean, which has been in her possession all along, and drops it into the sea over the wreck site. While she is seemingly asleep in her bed, her photos on the dresser depict a life of freedom and adventure inspired by her early conversations with Jack. A young Rose reunites with Jack at Titanic's grand staircase, applauded by those who died on the ship. Thanks for watching.